So you're going to hear people in the background. I'm talking a little bit louder than whispering because I'm not sure if you can hear me whisper because I'm not used to this phone yet. But I'm not a big fan of whispering anyways, as most of you know by now. So, especially you OGs out there, which, by the way, if you were here when I first started, my first 2 years, I was filming those college dorms, let me know in the comments, because I'm curious. Lucky me, I took one of my coworkers, some type of exam, I forget what it's called, but it's for a master's degree. I took all her study materials. So, we're going to be learning some psychology terms today. Let's see if I want to start with this or not. Ooh. Yes, let's start with this. Holy cow. How many pages does she have here? 29 pages. The dedicated, I tell you. Alright, so. Oh, I actually learned about this in my cultural counseling class. We learned about different races and genders and how they are in like therapy and everything. So it says discuss the major racial identities and help-seeking attitudes you may encounter with African Americans, Hispanic Americans, and Asian Americans. What are the implications of each of these for the counseling process? African Americans help-seeking attitudes. They're statistically less likely to seek treatment in general, more likely to delay treatment, more likely to leave treatment early, tend to look for solutions to problems versus seeking therapy. Due to strong religious orientation, tend to seek religious authorities for help. Depending on stage of RCID. What is RCID? Sorry. May tend to seek out professionals of same race. Dissonance in appreciating, resistance in immersion, interpretation, or of majority race conformity. Because they are often victims of oppression, may have mistrust for the system. May also think psychology is white man's field. Implications for counseling. Examine stage of RCID. Okay, I need to look that up because I don't know what that means. Maybe it's in one of her note cards that she did. Look at all these note cards. Consider all aspects of culture, ethnic differences between client and counselor may impact success of therapy. Consider clients' attitudes about counseling and assessment, potential mistrust. Discuss discrimination and racism in terms of the client. Recognize potential lack of resources. Think Maslow's hierarchy. I'm pretty sure it's talking about the triangle. And the very top of the triangle is self-actualization, which means you achieved everything you wanted and everything. If I remember correctly. Don't quote me. Bless you. Hispanic Latino help-seeking attitudes. Stigma associated with mental illness. Machismo may be a barrier because concerns of time lost from work. Unacceptability of expressing emotions for both men and women. Women only express emotions with family? tend to underutilize resources, potential lack of documentation, potential linguistic issues, family-centered focus with hierarchy, father's primary authority figure, fatalistic worldview, belief that all events are predetermined and therefore inevitable, collectivistic culture, so may place more value on family support versus therapy, so collectivistic versus individualistic. America is an individualistic culture, and like Japan is collectivistic. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but whatever. Individualistic means that, like, when we go to war, when we're told a number of people who passed away, it hurts a lot because we're like, oh my gosh, like all those lives. But in like a collectivistic culture, they think of the country as a whole, like Japan. You risk your own life. I mean, obviously Americans risk their own lives for war. I'm just trying, this is the only way I'm able to give an example because this is how I was taught. So like, they're told to sacrifice themselves if they're gonna get killed because of honor, but also like, if one person dies but they win the war, then that's better than if like the whole country went down, like they don't mourn as much. I don't know. Okay, I could have definitely just butchered that example. I know what I'm trying to say, and I'm so bad at explaining things. I get told that all the time by my family, so I'm sorry. Educational component to treatment to make it more acceptable. Implications for counseling. Warmth and respect are important. Consider whether a translator is needed. Explain confidentiality, especially with undocumented clients. Consider including other family members due to collectivistic culture. Oh, yeah, so, Americans will put our families in nursing homes, or white people put people in nursing homes, but Hispanic people are like, no, we'll take care of you, he's gonna stay in the house. Like, statistically speaking, for both sides, don't want you going to a nursing home, stuff like that. Recognizing authority of the father by addressing him first. Personalismo is also a factor wanting to incorporate you into family, so beware of boundary crossing. Yes, that's very important. You can't be a dual relationship. I actually had to teach one of my patients about that. Framing therapy as classes and giving homework worksheets helps to decrease resistance to treatment. We give our patients worksheets. Asian Americans help-seeking attitudes. Reluctance to seek psychological help, especially because expression of emotion is frowned upon, so do not readily discuss these. Often seek help from Asian professionals. Presentation of symptoms tend to be psychosomatic, appear physical versus internal. May instead seek out their primary care physician rather than therapy. Implications for counseling. Oh shoot, there are some words in here I will not be able to pronounce. Collectivistic culture, so may be a need to include family in therapy. Filial piety. Sorry, I don't want to sneeze. Oh my gosh. What appears to be codependency may be cultural values. If patient bow back at the same level or lower. Father is the provider, decision maker, address father first in therapy. Family may be over-involved in therapy. Autonomy, individualistic, and independence are not necessarily treatment goals. Always include family issues, common to give gifts. Agreeableness and compliance may be mistaken for passive acceptance rather than coping mechanisms, since they tend to attend therapy short-term, use problem-focused, time-limited approaches. Describe the responsiveness of each of the following groups to group therapy approaches. All the above and Native Americans. And what are the implications of these perspectives for the counseling process? Asian populations would not be as responsive because they're very private, shame around sharing their feelings in front of others regardless of others' culture. Asian populations would be the least responsive to groups because they see it as an invasion of privacy. African Americans might respond well to it because they're very community-based. Native Americans would do better if it was all Native Americans, including the group leader, because with other cultures there would be mistrust that was needed to be worked through. Group treatment fits well in the Native American worldview. Collaborate with chief or healer if possible to be in the group. Hispanic Americans consider language barriers amongst group members and are expected to be machismo. How do I pronounce that? Strong, dominant, so might not respond well. Any marginalized group may have difficulty trusting group members of other cultures. So, describing the processes of classical and operant conditioning, how do they apply to the development and maintenance of phobic behaviors, and what are the implications of these processes for treatment? Both deal with learning, just depends on how that learning occurs. Classical conditioning. The pairing of a neutral stimulus with an unconditioned stimulus results in neutral stimulus becoming a conditioned stimulus, eliciting the same response as the unconditioned stimulus. Oh my gosh, what was that scientist's name? I can't remember. An example, dog salivating to a bell alone after the bell, neutral, and then conditioned stimulus is paired with presentation of food, unconditioned response. I feel like the doctor's name started with an S. I could be wrong. I know who it is because we studied it every year I took psychology. Operant conditioning, a type of learning in which behavior is strengthened if followed by reinforcement or diminished if followed by punishment. Both positive and negative reinforces increased behavior. Positive punishment adds an aversive stimulus. Negative punishment takes away a stimulus. Example, a rat trained to press the lever to receive food. Mauer's two-factor theory explains the way in which both classical and operant conditioning contribute to the development of phobias. The initial development of the phobias is set off when something activates a fear response in the body and the person learns that the occurrence in classical, possibly the circumstances around it, is dangerous. Maybe she was just writing notes beside it. Oh, she's just writing notes beside it. Possibly the circumstances around it are dangerous. They begin to avoid that stimulus and its circumstances, and sometimes other related stimuli as well through the process of stimulus generalization. Example, little Albert and rat. The maintenance of the phobia occurs through operant conditioning. The sufferer avoids that stimulus and the circumstances around it, and the avoidance behavior is reinforced by the ensuing relief he feels. Positive reinforcement or by the non-appearance of fear and anxiety symptoms. Negative reinforcement via avoidance. The implication of these processes is that exposure therapy is the most effective method of treatment. By supporting the person as he confronts his fear and by preventing his avoidance of it, the patient becomes desensitized through repeated exposures. His anxiety response may be extinguished through the desensitization process, or he may learn that he is able to tolerate the feared object or situation and that his anxiety will peak and then abate over time. Another outline of two-factor theory from notes. Respondent: fear develops from direct or vicarious exposure to trauma. Trauma-associated stimuli becomes CS and elicits CR. Conditioned stimulus and conditioned response. Took me a second, but I figured it out. Operant: escape avoidance behavior in presence of pre-aversive stimuli prevents exposure to trauma. Associated stimuli averting extinction. Avoidance is maintained despite the person never being exposed to trauma and related stimuli again. Therapeutic extinction. Exposure to conditioned stimuli repeatedly without the unconditioned stimuli and preventing avoidance. Possible example: Dixie avoiding door after having her tail closed. Walking her through repeatedly with treat helped extinguish the fear response with the door. Conditioned stimuli: because she no longer associated the door with pain. Unconditioned response and fear. Conditioned response. So I am going to go to sleep because it is probably 8:30, so I'm going to try and get 7 hours.